Hello there, folks, and a happy Pride Month to you all. Now, I know I promised this video over a year ago, but I've had a lot to think about. I mean, there's been a ton of content that's already come out about Metal Gear Rising. What can I say that hasn't already been said? Show you what hasn't already been shown. Comment on what hasn't already been commented on. Well, if you can bear with me, there is something that I would like to talk about. So, without any further ado,
let's go!
Now, allow me to be frank with you for just a moment. I've never played any of the Metal Gear games before Rising, and still haven't. Why? Well, because there was always this air of pretension that surrounded them. These are games that tackled mature topics with subtlety and nuance, where each line of dialogue, each character interaction, each setting had layers and layers of esoteric knowledge stored within. And I won't lie, that air of, shall I call it, snobbishness, turned me off from the series for a long time. Not that I couldn't handle understanding a series like that. I should know, I watch anime. But rather, I didn't want to have to navigate the minefield that was the Metal Gear Solid discourse. I didn't want to have to deal with people that said I was wrong, or don't understand, or wouldn't get it. But you know what? Subtlety is probably what Metal Gear Rising director Kenji Saito said when he directed this game, because Metal Gear Rising takes all that air of pretension, all that subtlety, all that nuance, and throws it out the fucking window. Metal Gear Rising is bombastic. It's in your face. It's fast and aggressive. If the Metal Gear Solid series is two men in a parlor sipping whiskey and discussing war, peace, and truth, then Metal Gear Rising is a fucking metal concert, screaming its topics in its audience's faces. And the soundtrack reflects this. Metal Gear Rising covers quite a few topics, from questions of identity, truth, child soldiers, the nature of war, and so on. But it doesn't just speak it to you, it sings it to you. The brilliance of this is that it allows players to play while hearing all this internalized monologue that would otherwise be reserved for a fucking cutscene. A 71-minute cutscene, even. That way, there's no break in action, which is very important for Metal Gear Rising, even for its mechanics, which, if you didn't know, a major feature of this game's mechanics is there is no block button. The way you block is by directly attacking in the same direction that an enemy is attacking you, which makes for very fast, high-paced gameplay with very few breaks. Now, I know some people have argued that they don't like this mechanic and that they don't like the general gameplay of Metal Gear Rising. You know who you are. But for me, this isn't much of an issue. I'm used to mashing buttons anyway. And while I understand that the combat in this game doesn't allow for much expression and play as it does with a game like Devil May Cry, I feel to implement a fighting style like Devil May Cry would break the main idea of the game a lot. Aggressive progress. This game wants you to keep going. From the very second it starts, from the very moment it says go, there is no break. And while, yes, there is some ludonarrative dissonance with the inclusion of stealth scenes left over from its more stealth-based roots, I find that being able to style on an enemy, then move on to a next enemy, then move on to a next enemy, and then end the fight scene and then move on, would break too much of the momentum of the game. And on top of this vichyssoise of music and mechanics, we also have an incredible rogue gallery of baddies that we have to fight throughout the game. Be it a woman with hundreds of arms, a magnetic man, Alex Jones with 2 machetes, or a walking Colgate commercial, this game has no shortage of iconic characters. But the one that comes to my mind, perhaps the foremost in my mind, the most memorable, is Senator Armstrong. That's right, Senator Armstrong. The final enemy of this game is a United States Senator, if you didn't know, and something that I really can't understate. Because while the threats in Metal Gear Rising are physical and material ones, they're also philosophical ones. A philosophy that generates needless suffering. A philosophy that places war as the noblest of pursuits, and human compassion as one of the weakest things imaginable. In fact, it puts me in mind of a novel I read once. Men are born for games, nothing else. Every child knows that play is nobler than work. He knows, too, that the worth or merit of a game is not inherent in the game itself, but rather in the value of that which is put at hazard. Games of chance require a wager to have meaning at all. Games of sport involve the skill and strength of the opponents, and the humiliation of defeat and the pride of victory are in themselves sufficient stake because they inhere in the worth of the principles and define them. But trial of chance or trial of worth, all games aspire to the condition of war, for here that which is wagered swallows up game, player, all. Suppose 2 men at cards with nothing to wager save their lives. Who has not heard such a tale? A turn of the card, the whole universe for such a player has labored clanking to this moment, which will tell if he is to die at the man's hand or that man at his. What more certain validation of a man's worth could there be? This enhancement of the game to its ultimate state admits no argument concerning the notion of fate. The selection of one man over another is a preference absolute and irrevocable, and it is a dull man indeed who would reckon so profound a decision without agency or significance either one. In such games as have for their stake the humiliation of the defeat, the decisions are quite clear. This man, holding this particular arrangement of cards in his hand, is thereby removed from existence. This is the nature of war, whose stake is at once the game and the authority and the justification. See so, war is the truest form of divination. It is the testing of one's will and the will of another within the larger will, which because it binds them is therefore forced to select. War is the ultimate game, because war is at last a forcing of the unity of existence. War is God. As I was reading Blood Meridian and hearing the judge's sermon on war, I thought about how much that philosophy reflected the judge's character. For those that haven't read Blood Meridian, it's a book about a gang of scalpers that maraud through Mexico, killing hundreds and hundreds of innocent indigenous people, at first for money, but then just for the heck of it. Among them is this character, Judge Holden, a large, pale figure, fluent in many languages, well-traveled and educated, but utterly diabolical. He shoots parrots in the jungles of Mexico, stating, "Anything that exists without my knowledge exists without my consent." He causes riots. He runs around naked a lot of the times, and every time that he's in a town, a child, coincidentally, goes missing. He is the closest thing to the devil that could possibly exist within the material world of Blood Meridian. I mean, he believes war is God. That alone made me think instantly of Senator Armstrong. You see, just like the judge, Senator Armstrong believes war to be the most noblest pursuit in life. He believes it the passageway to true primordial freedom, a freedom of which the United States hasn't yet known. A belief that he accepts so fervently, he's willing to use his ties to government and capital to burn all social structures and safety nets in the United States of America to the ground, ensuring the suffering of countless innocent individuals, so those in power, be it through capital or actual physical strength, will prosper, and those that don't have it will die. Can you imagine that? A United States Senator sharing a worldview with the devil. Do you know how dangerous that could be? Well, the sad reality is, it's not that far off, with legislation being passed day after day affecting the lives of many Americans, impoverished and marginalized. Not to mention we export this cruelty abroad. The conflicts that started when I were a child continue unabated. Think with such violence, hatred, and ignorance in the world that our media, our modern media, would comment on this. But they're no better. I mean, look at how Marvel handles when a senator makes crappy decisions on behalf of the American people.
You control the banks. Shit, you can move borders.
You can knock down a forest with the email. You can feed 1 million people with the phone call.
But the question is, who's in the room with you when you're making those decisions?
You've got to do better, Senator. You've got to step up. Because if you don't, the next Carly will. And you don't want to see 2.0.
Now, look at how Metal Gear Rising tackles the same issue. And this is why I love this game so much, and why this game is so popular even after a decade of being released. It's bold. In a time where we feel we can do nothing, in a time where people in power are careening society into a gorge, in a time where war is God, compassion is thought of as weakness, and apathy reigns, Metal Gear Rising does something brave. It says something. We're effing tired of bigotry. We're effing tired of lies. We're effing exhausted and we're effing sick of cruelty and avarice. And while our movies and shows make dull effing attempts to scratch at the real philosophical problems that plague us today, Metal Gear Rising dares to do something that everybody else should. It doesn't take a jab at the issue. It takes a cut. It cuts like a fucking knife.